Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show, folks. I am honored to have back with me someone who is a very dear friend and someone who is a patriot of the highest order, General Michael Flynn. For those of you not familiar with General Flynn, and that would probably be close to no one in this country or around the world, a little background. With more than 33 years of service in the United States military and current chairman of America's Future, General Michael Flynn's military career culminated as a director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and is the nation's highest-serving military intelligence officer. After retiring from the Army in 2014 and as a private citizen, General Flynn went on to serve in a variety of business, educational, and nonprofit roles to include supporting veterans organizations around the country, something he continues to do to this day. His public service included selection and service as a foreign policy advisor to several Republican U.S. presidential candidates in 2016 and subsequent appointment and service as the national security advisor to the 45th President of the United States of America. General Flynn is a national best-selling author, holds 3 master's degrees, as a recipient of numerous military intelligence and law enforcement awards. He is married to his best friend, Lori, and is the proud dad to 2 sons and his best job ever, the proud grandparent to a number of grandchildren. It's my honor to welcome back our friend, General Michael Flynn.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for that great introduction. I really, really appreciate it. I miss you. We've been diehard patriots here in this fight for America to save our country. I mean, you've been at the talk about pointing into the spirit for many, many years, Dave. Your audience knows it. The people that know you know that, and so I'm glad that we're reconnected in this fight to save America.
General Flynn, the deep state, the criminal international banking syndicate, the globalist cult, the globalist syndicate, whatever you want to call them, are going to despise what we're about to do in the next 30 minutes. And the reason is because what this is about and what you have always been about is the truth and nothing but the truth. General Flynn, you are one of the top geopolitical analysts and policy initiators in this world on many different planes. What I'd like to do is a surgical dissection of the political landscape from a geopolitical aspect, from the Middle East to Main Street USA. Let's start in the Middle East. We're yet again involved in another Middle East war. 100 years ago, an author by the name of Arthur Ponsonby wrote, "When war is declared, truth is the first casualty." General Flynn, I believe if we listen to the governments of the world and to the bought-off lamestream media entities of the world, we're fed a bunch of mis and disinformation and complete untruths. General Flynn, give us your assessment of this current war in the Middle East. How we got here and where it's going.
Yeah, so first of all, and I appreciate all that, Dave. So first of all, for your audience and for anybody that listens, agree with me or not, I'm gonna lay out some things that are true. People can go research them on their own if they'd like, and they can take it for what it's worth. I think one of the responsibilities that we now have is to deliver the truth, no matter the cost. Mm-hmm. And it's, as you said, about warfare. One of the first casualties is truth. And I have always said, if you anybody who studies war, and I have not only a personal experience in war many, many years, I also have a master's degree. One of those master's degrees that you mentioned is a master's in warfare, the study of warfare, the study of history and the history of warfare. So there's a lot of background and experience that I bring to these kinds of discussions and frankly to what is happening globally. So before we dive into the Middle East, I think what people need to understand is that there is clearly a global alliance that has formed against the United States of America. It's really formed initially against the West and those still remaining democracies. But that was years ago. That was probably like maybe 10, 15 years ago, where there still were some, you would call them democracies like Australia or New Zealand or maybe even Great Britain. You could include the likes of Canada, 10 years ago, but not now. So now the last of the remaining free countries on the planet, really the last redoubt, I call it, is America, is the United States of America. And this global alliance is a very, very real alliance, and it is a powerhouse alliance made up of principally 5 countries, and they have worked very hard to coalesce behind what I call kind of an economic screen, but they also have very powerful military relationships within this alliance. Now I'm going to mention these countries here in a second, and then added to those 5, and those 5 represent about 50% of the global population, of the world's population. Added to those 5 recently were 7 new adherents, I guess, if you want to call them, 7 new additions to this 5. Well, those 5 are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're known as the acronym BRICS, and people look at them as an economic alliance, but they're much, much more than an economic alliance. Each of them has their own histories and cultures and backgrounds, but they also have military relationships that are very, very strong. People think about, India and China, if you really want to dig in, that, they have their own difficulties with borders and such, but India and Russia have a very strong military relationship. The Indian Navy, which is a very strong Navy, is actually made and designed and built by the Russians. I mean, the Russians actually build the Indian navies. That's a big deal. People need to understand that. And then the other plus 7 nations that recently joined this alliance, are countries like Saudi Arabia, of course, Iran, the likely suspects, Iran, Venezuela, Turkey, which is also a member of NATO, and that's going to bring us into the Middle East here in a second, right? And other nations, Venezuela is another one. And people look at these nations and go, well, those are third world nations. Well, guess what? When I do bring this around to hometown America or Main Street America, we're starting to look like a third world nation here. So this global alliance of 5 plus 7 now consists of about 75% of the world's population. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. So now let's take it to the Middle East and what is happening in the Middle East. Well, we, the United States of America, have displayed just a utter level of weakness that started really when we retreated under the threat of arms from Afghanistan a couple of years ago. Now we're getting ready this coming summer. We just had the 2-year anniversary last August. So 2 years ago, we basically a little over 2 years ago now, we retreated from Afghanistan. We surrendered to the enemy in the face of the enemy, and we left American citizens behind. When you do something like that, and it's not just at the cost of the lives that were lost and those that were seriously injured, but also to the tune of whatever the number was, $80 to $100 billion in military equipment, almost $6 trillion in other funds that we spent over 20 years. So all of that resulted in a massive, massive display of weakness on the part of this current administration, this false, fake administration run by this individual in the name of Biden, who we know is really the lead puppeteer that's part of this global cabal of elitists, this globalism. People like Barack Obama, who is still residing in Washington, D.C., the first president to do so, in the history of the country. The only other president that stayed in Washington, D.C. after being a president only stayed there because he had a stroke. And once he got healthy enough, he left. And that was well over 100 years ago. So Barack Obama has stayed in Washington, D.C. because like he said, I want to fundamentally change America. And if I could be president without all the, accoutrements and rear end pain and run it from, my basement, which is exactly what he's doing. So we can't kid ourselves. And everything that I just said, please challenge me on it, Dave, or anybody in your audience or anybody that sees this on social media. So the Middle East has seen the likes of the United States of America in terms of a weakness like they have never, ever seen. So not only under the Obama administration, but under the Biden administration, we've been paying them billions, principally Iran, billions and billions of dollars. We are about to send another couple of $1 billion on a budget that this new House, the new speaker is actually, I think he's ready to do it. I mean, this is just what's crazy about House speakers. This is not about Democrats and Republicans anymore. This is about the globalists and the establishment versus us, regular old Americans who still care deeply about our country. So this weakness in the Middle East led to the attack, the utter attack, the sheer brutal attack against Israel, that we witnessed, by this radical Islamist group, Hamas. And Hamas is part of, various organizations, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the PIJ, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was really created by Yasser Arafat, who's deceased now, but, his legacy still lives on, and other leaders in the Gaza. And now we have Israel engaged with Hezbollah. We have Israel engaged with parts of the Syrian Defense Forces. We have Iran with its surrogates in Yemen, the Houthi rebels, and its surrogates in Iraq, and its surrogates in Syria, conducting attacks against U.S. forces. I think we now are upwards of, I think it's close to 50 attacks now against U.S. forces in principally in Iraq and Syria. Many of those attacks against U.S. forces. Now, these are U.S. forces. We just spent $7 trillion in the country of Iraq. U.S. forces that have sustained injuries. I don't know if we've had any actual killed in action yet, but injuries are all it takes. Is enough for me. We have guys that are now wounded in action by people that we spent $7 trillion. We lost many, many lives in Iraq trying to build that country up, and now that country is turned on us. They're turned on us in the likes of the Iranian regime, which is basically demonstrating a level of dominance, of military dominance in the Middle East through various surrogates, principally Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthi rebels down in Yemen. And the Houthi rebels have fired at least 8 long-range missiles, probably upwards of maybe 12, maybe as many as 16, but we know of at least 8 that have been reported in the public square in the media, open source media. Our naval ships at sea down there in the Red Sea have had to engage those to stop them, and we've been lucky so far. Those missiles from Yemen, from the southern part of Yemen, range Israel, which tells you a lot about the capability of those missiles. Mm-hmm. And also, what we haven't seen yet is we haven't seen ballistic missiles, and I emphasize ballistic missiles, be fired out of Iran yet into Israel, because Iran may not need those, because Hezbollah, we know Hezbollah, which is on the southern part of Lebanon, the northern zone of Israel, they have over 100,000 rockets. We know that in their inventory they have over 100,000 rockets, which would overwhelm the Iron Dome system that the Israelis that the Israelis have in order to defend their own territory. So Israel is in a tough spot. Never mind what they're trying to do in Gaza, to get a couple of hundred hostages back. The United States of America has at least 400 hostages being held, because those were people that actually did work in Gaza for various organizations. And guess what? These people, they don't care. They don't care about human life. They hate Americans. They hate the infidel. And so what they're doing is they've taken Americans who were operating in Gaza, they've taken them hostage. So now we're looking at probably a hostage situation in Gaza, mm-hmm. to the tune of about, let's just lowball it a little bit, 300 to 600 people. It's probably closer to 1,000. We know how brutal these people are acting in terms of where their tunnels are, where they're firing the rockets from Gaza into Israel, are in places like mosques. They're in hospitals. So the tactical situation, Dave, in the Middle East right now, frankly, is not going in Israel's direction. It is mm-hmm. not strategically. Mm-hmm. So the 60,000-foot level, the way I see the tactics unfolding and what Israel is having to do, Israel is, may present itself, as though they're on the front foot. They got a good, strong stance, and they're laying waste to those that really did this devastating attack on them on the 7th of October. But really what's happened is I see Israel as kind of in a strategic defensive mode, and they're a bit on their heels because they are surrounded, physically surrounded by Hezbollah to the north, Hamas to the south, Syria to the north and east, and then of course abutted by Jordan, which is not it is a lukewarm relationship to Israel because it's an Arab nation, right? And it's led by a monarch in the name of Hussein. One of the other points that I like to bring out when I talk about the Middle East is why, and it's really a question for us all to answer and to have a great debate on it. It's why is the Palestinian problem an Israeli problem? Why isn't the Palestinians and why isn't the Palestinian problem an Arab problem? Why don't the Arab nations, why doesn't Egypt open up the Sinai and build a Gaza Strip in the Sinai? Why don't the Saudis, say to the Palestinians, look, we'll let you come into Saudi Arabia. Why don't the Jordanians? Why don't the Omanis, et cetera, et cetera? Why don't these Arab nations, why doesn't a country like Iran open up to, and I will tell you my answer to that question is that they don't want these people because they're radicalized. They see them actually as, in many cases, if you really study the Arab mind, they see the Palestinians as a lesser form of society, a lesser form of culture than their own monolithic cultures, right? Than their own monolithic culture of an Egyptian or a Saudi or an Omani. I mean, these are tribal nature cultures, and it's like the joke goes, and you ain't in it, Palestine, you're not in it, so you're not going to be allowed. So what they do. So when you look at it, and people will go, well, this has been going on since, for thousands of years. Yes, it has. And the idea is that what they have to have, what the Muslim world, Islamic world needs is they need somebody to be the sort of their excuse for their own inadequacies and their excuse to go after the Jew, right? To go after the Israeli and the Jewish state. And that's why they use these radicalized organizations in places like in the quote unquote Palestinian issue, right, where the globalists are going to say we want to have a two-state solution. So my answer to that is bullshit. Excuse my Irish. Tell the two-state solution. Tell that to the Egyptians, tell that to the Saudis, tell that to the UAE. There's your two-state solution. You want a two-state solution? Why is it an Israeli problem? And a little bit being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, people don't go on tour guides in Gaza Strip because if you did, you'd all be beheaded. But people go on tour guides in places like Jerusalem and Israel because there's a lot of things to see there. And guess what? When you go there, you feel very safe, at least in the past. You have a good tour. You have a good tour guide. You're able to go visit some of the very biblical places on the planet. But you can only do that in Israel. Why? Because Israel is a free, open society. It's a democratic nation. They have a duly elected system of government, and they basically maintain a open and generally honest relationship with the world, where an organization like Hamas, organizations like Hezbollah, organizations like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, all of these various groups, the Yemeni Houthis that are supported by Iran, they have no relationships. They have zero because they're just radicalized elements of within the Islamic world. The Islamic world needs to come to grips with itself, and those leaders like al-Sisi in Egypt, they need to step up and really take on a leadership role for the greater good of the world. Because otherwise, this war, and mark my words, Dave, for your audience, this war is not going to end like the 67 or the 73 wars. It's not going to end in 6 days or 1 week. It's going to end, and it's going to end in a way that I think that most people don't realize. And I actually think it's going to take on a much, much bigger face. So, the tactics of what are happening, the Israelis are down at the ground level and they're conducting all kinds of military operations to seize terrain and to hold terrain and to destroy this enemy and to hopefully recover their hostages. But the strategic situation, when you rise above the Middle East, we see these gigantic rallies of pro-Palestine, which is all, it's all BS, because you got to start saying, okay, who are behind these big rallies? Is it radicalized Islamists? Is it because of the large-scale immigration from the Middle East and from North Africa into places like Europe and places like the United States now? Is it because of the constant illegal immigration over 20 to 25 years within the United States of America into places like, Wisconsin, Michigan, Northern Virginia, Northern Florida? I mean, there's a lot of places in this country where there are segments of our society that are the Muslim groups within our country. And the Muslims in this country have to come to grips with this. Did they come here for freedom, to be able to practice their faith freely, or did they come here for some other reasons, right? So when we look at strategically what is happening in the Middle East, it is not a war that is just going to damage the Middle East. It's going to have untold, unimaginable consequences in Europe and right here in the United States of America. We saw a little bit of that when there was the rally the other day, a large rally in Washington, D.C., where they defamed parts of the White House, right? And when I say parts of the White House, well, guess what? The fence surrounding the White House, which had graffiti put on it, which they tried to shake down. It's a very strong fence, but they defamed that. As far as I'm concerned, you had a large group of people that were climbing the fences, and what should have happened was they should have deployed the damn National Guard, because they don't know what these people are going to do.
That's right.
And we talk about all of the J6 stuff, right, that happened. These people actually did damage, just like in the I call it the summer of love, Dave, of 2020.
Right.
So we do know now that in this relationship that we've seen inside the United States of America with those who are behind this Palestinian movement, this Palestinian rally movement in this country, because it's not really people that are Muslims. These are activists. We now know that elements of Black Lives Matter and Antifa have joined forces with these other groups that are now representing, and a lot of it's through college campuses, a lot of it's through other organizations here in this country that we know are activist organizations. And this is the kind of stuff that our FBI been doing its job properly for the last 30 years, they would have such a strong grip on these leaders of these organizations. But the FBI has been focusing on white Christians who are outside of abortion clinics and going after and arresting, men and women who have been standing up for life, instead of these horrific organizations that stand for nothing but the overthrow of the United States government. And we have people inside of our government. So we know, Dave, and you probably followed some of this. We know we had people in the Department of Defense,
That's right,
in the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Office, that were and they were being directly influenced by Iran. We have people in the National Security Council, which I'm very familiar with. In fact, both of those organizations I'm very familiar with, that were tied and probably need to be investigated for spying on our country while they were members of not only the Department of Defense, but also the National Security Council. We know for certain that the envoy to Iran was basically relieved of duty and had his security clearance stripped, probably because he was sharing, classified information and secrets with Iran. This was the guy that was the United States State Department envoy to Iran in the negotiations that we were having with Iran to have, guess what? A nuclear weapon.
And that was Robert Malley. Robert Malley.
Exactly. Where is he today? What is happening with him? What is it? So those are questions that are going to have to be answered. But you know what, Dave? Only guys like you and I are going to be talking about a guy like that. You're not going to hear that on ABC or on 60 Minutes, right?
No, you sure aren't.
This is for your audience and for where I'm at these days. These are the issues that I am aware of. These are the kinds of things that are happening. We haven't even gotten to really the border invasion And, we've talked a little bit about what's happening here on, on Main Street, America. These rallies that we have seen, these are not the end of them. These are not the last of the rallies that we have seen. These are not the last of the actions that these activists, and all it takes, Dave, is it takes one psychopath, and there's many out there, but it just takes one psychopath who says, Allahu Akbar, and decides he's going to go kill a whole bunch of people because, on behalf of his religiosity or whatever it is that drives that particular mind, and goes out and does something really dangerous. And what'll happen is the big media will initially blame some white guy for it. And then, again, back to the very first comment that you made, Dave, the first casualty of war is the truth.
Yeah.
And the media is not going to, the big media is not going to give us the truth. They're not. So we have to fight for the truth. We have to, no matter, like I say, we have to deliver the truth no matter the cost. And we have to do it through these independent voices. And you've been one who has been fiercely independent for so many years. And frankly, not just that, but also your support for my fight over the many years, is just very, very, it was very generous and very well and sincerely appreciated. So let me stop there. If you got any questions.
Well, General Flynn, I was honored to do anything and everything I could to help someone who is being railroaded by a system that has become unjust. And you mentioned the summer of love, as you call it, in 2020. That really was a prep of the battlefield, that summer of love, for what transpired in November of 2020, which ultimately led to the installation, and I use that term, installation, of Biden, a puppet of the syndicate. General Flynn, we have another election potentially coming up in November of 2024. My concern is the following, sir. When I look at what occurred, whether it was the massive mail-in voting, the drop boxes, the voter rolls, the lack of voter ID, machines that were connected to the internet, the lack of following through the ballots with their credibility, with their to verify them. General Flynn, I'm concerned when I look back at what happened in that operation in 2020 that led to the installation of Biden, that nothing has really been addressed, and that we are more likely to repeat what happened in November of 2020 in November of 2024. And if my concern is accurate, what can every one of our listeners do to make sure to do everything possible so that we actually have an election process that does not lead again to an installation of a globalist cult puppet?
Yeah. So a couple of things. And I want people to, I don't know if you're familiar with what just recently happened, a judge's ruling in based on an election, a mayoral election in Bridgeport, Connecticut, very recently, between two Democrats, right? And some of the video footage was actually of one of the individuals, so the judge's decision is, it's so fraught with corruption. There's so much criminal behavior within that election by Democrats that he has directed that another election has to occur. How about that, right? So some of the video footage actually shows one of the people going up, and they had a key to the ballot box that was on a street corner, where they opened up the ballot box. They took all of the ballots that were in there out. They basically threw them into a bag. And then they took their own ballots and threw them into the box, right? So they didn't have to stand there and stuff them and then make sure, and then maybe somebody actually got the count right. No, they actually stole the ballots out, put in their own ballots. I mean, this is the kind of problem that's happening all over the place. We saw this in Fulton County, Georgia, where the people at between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock the day after the election, they reach under the desks and they grab the boxes and they started stuffing ballots, printing ballots out and putting them. I mean, it was like another 350,000. We know in places like Pennsylvania, these same things happen. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Arizona. So all of these kinds of things happen. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? So the phrase I use, and I'm going to be building this as we go forward. And I'll come back on and I'll talk specifically about this at another time. But I use the phrase guard the vote, guard the vote. Because the reason why in Bridgeport, when you really think about it, and frankly, a judge who had the guts, because a lot of judges now, it's tough, because they're human beings, right? But this judge had the guts to make the call. And a lot of it had to do with video footage of some of these drop boxes, right? These ballot boxes that exist on the street corners where people are like doing stuff nefariously at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And so now what I use the phrase guard the vote, guard the vote. And you're going to hear more about this in the days and weeks ahead. So guard the vote. One of the items with guard the vote is those people at the local level, and I use the phrase local action has a national impact. So if you have ballot boxes in your town or city, and they're out there for people to drop them in some states they start at 45 days, and they have voting from 45 days all the way into election day. Some states have 30 days. We have a couple of gubernatorial races going on today, Mississippi and Kentucky as an example, right? And there's mail-in ballots, there's ballot boxes. But as one small example, if there's a ballot box, let's not rely on the cameras because there may not be cameras that are in the right places. Let's actually get volunteer people. Let's get volunteers. And if you have to go and get a group of people and you have so many ballot boxes, and I don't care if you have 100 of them, get the volunteers, because if we want to protect the sanctity of the one thing that makes us equal, on one day, it's our election day and it's our vote. That's the strength of our constitutional republic. You might have to guard those ballot boxes, right? You may have to stand guard, literally. A couple of people standing there with their phones, a cup of coffee in hand. You're going to have to be there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but you're going to have to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning too. So you're going to have, shift work. People aren't going to come there if somebody sees somebody standing there, that's going to keep people away from coming over and doing nefarious things like stuffing the envelopes in, right? So we're going to have to guard the vote. That's one of the steps to take. And I mean that. When people go, Jesus, what are we talking about here? I'm talking about active citizens taking responsibility for the honesty of our vote and not allow these crooks, because there's not a lot of these crooks out there, but there's enough to where they're going to do that kind of damage and cause the kind of things that we have seen. We can't allow that. On mail-in ballots, we know that mail-in ballots come in via the mail all the time. And where do they typically go? They go to the county seat. Yep. They usually go to the county seat. Right. Well, most of the people in there are not volunteers. They're citizens that work in there. They're government employees. And if you have a generally area where there's mostly, it's a strong Democrat area, it's a strong Republican area, you can actually tell where the problems exist. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that when those mail-in ballots come in, people have to be, literally, you got to be there and keeping an eye on this kind of stuff. We've got to have this kind of activism at the local level. And people have to be in there and start to, and you can do this. People can do this because it's a legal thing to do. You can go into your county and you can demand to ask the election recorder how many mail-in ballots came in today. You don't have to know who they voted for, but how many came in today. So you say, okay, 55 came in today. 10,500 came in tomorrow, et cetera. You get a tally of those votes. One of the things we learned after the fact in Pennsylvania, they had over 200,000 additional ballots in the state of Pennsylvania, more than they actually had registered voters. Right. And yet they were counted. I mean, we can no longer have this absolute criminal, corrupt behavior in our election system. Otherwise, we don't have a country. So that's that's sort of big number one. The number two is there is an organization. It's called precinctstrategy.com. Precinctstrategy.com. People can go to that. They can sign up and they can participate in their own states. It's a nationwide effort, and they can sign up to be part of it. And it gives you some ideas about the kinds of things that you can take responsibility for in your own, principally in your counties and in your precincts. Part of what it does is it teaches you things about your precinct that a lot of people don't know. I mean, I just recently moved to Florida a couple of years ago. I'm actually a signed up volunteer with all the other things that I'm doing to go around this country to do the things that I'm doing to raise awareness of what's happening. My wife and I signed up as volunteers for our precinct to be poll watchers, right? We went through the poll watcher training, and it's got to be more than that. It's not just watching, it's actually doing and getting hands-on and making sure that when we are there for that period of time, it's not just being somebody who's active on voting day, because we now know with what happened with COVID, what they did was that a lot of these states changed the rules, and we now have much greater mail-in balloting, right? And we have many more of these drop boxes. So we've got to guard the vote, and guarding the vote. And again, more information is going to come out in the steps that people can take. We will have that. And I think actually we're going to eventually have a guardthevote.com, but people can go to precinctstrategy.com. It's a very good tactical way for people to get involved. We have got to be challenging our elected officials at the local level. We can't just worry about what's happening in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a filthy, and I mean that word precisely, it is a filthy mess. And the people that are there, from the executive branch to the legislative branch, are just out of control. And I would even say some in the judiciary, because I experienced one of them for sure, are just completely out of control. And they're the level of, I don't know, you hate to think that people that are servants are anti-American, but they definitely are doing things that are against what I would think would be constitutional issues and constitutional law that we have that say, you can't do things like censor. Like, for example, I just pulled it up a minute ago, and I'll just read you the headline so people are aware that this happened in 2020. This happened while Trump was the president, but they did this to undermine him. Okay, they didn't do this to help him. They did this to undermine him. That's called traitor. That's called treason. Okay, and Jim Jordan put this out yesterday, and it basically it's a report, and it's on the censorship industrial complex. Hundreds of secret reports show that DHS, CISA, which is this cybersecurity agency of the government, the global there's a global organization inside the State Department that deals with cyber. So the State Department and Stanford University all collaborated and all worked together to undermine the election of 2020. So that report just came out in the last 24 hours. Jim Jordan put it out. And one thing that I've asked Jim Jordan, he basically says the federal government, disinformation experts at universities, big tech, and others work together through the election integrity partnership, quote unquote, election integrity partnership, which sounds good, to monitor and censor American speech in order to undermine the 2020 election. They did that not at the behest of President Trump. They did that to undermine President Trump. That's called treason. That's treason. Okay. And so these people now need to be held accountable. Now, what I have put out, I've said that, Jim Jordan, you need to stop going on Fox News and telling us what the problem is. You need to go, you're the head, you're the committee, you're the chairman for the Judiciary Committee. You can issue subpoenas, bring these people under oath, put them under the lights, and get them to basically, they can do this. Get them to say what it is that they did, because we already have the facts. We've already got the facts in our favor, and let's hold these people to account. We cannot have this in our country where people inside of our government, the quote unquote deep state, undermines a duly elected president of the United States, like him or not. It doesn't matter, Washington, D.C. You don't run this country. The people of this country run this country. We do it through our elections. And when we believe that our elections are not fair or undermined by those elitists, those globalists, those establishment deep state bureaucrats and elected officials in Washington, D.C., enough is enough, and we cannot have this anymore. And people need to understand that there are whistleblowers that have come forward. There are more whistleblowers that are about to come forward. People are going to be held accountable. Trust me, one way or the other. And like I say, you're going to be held accountable either here on earth or you'll be held accountable at the gates of hell. and I'll be waiting for them right there. Believe me, because we cannot have this and think that our country is going to survive, right? Because in 2024, which is only a year away, right? It's only a year away, this election, our 2024 election for the next president of the United States. There's no way in the world, given the economy, given the drug problems on our streets, given the border invasion, given the what is happening to our education system, the forced transgenderism. I mean, it's not even LGBTQ anymore. You've heard this in the last 48 hours. They've now added a new letter, Dave. It's LGBTQH, the transgender movement in this country, which is a very vocal, not large, but very vocal movement. They now added H for Hamas. Okay, LGBTQH. Okay, this is the types of people that are partnering, and these are not large organizations. These are small, but they're very vocal. They're very vocal, and we have to rise up and raise our voices, and we have to do it peacefully. We have to do it lawfully, but we have to do it. People in this country have to get off the couch and get out there and get involved in their local communities. I don't care. A question for your audience is when was the last time you attended a school board hearing or a city council hearing or a town council hearing? Probably never in many cases. People need to start to do that to show that they are upset with the direction of the country. We're upset with the elected officials that we have. We are not going to stand for it anymore because we're going to lose this country if we don't. So anyway, these are just things that have happened in the last probably week. And these are more, sort of bombshell, which I can't stand that word, but these are more big breaking news stories that sort of everybody knows. And what we don't want from our elected officials, Dave, is we don't want more talk on Fox News. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
We want action, and that's all I'm calling for.
General Flynn, let's conclude with this. You have gotten in trouble for this, as have I, or a lot of pushback. This sitting on the couch, getting off the couch is critical. One of the big problems, General Flynn, is that there's this push within the freedom movement to trust the plan. Okay, well, trust the plan. But first, how about show me the plan, number one. Yeah. And number two, trust the plan, unfortunately, has led to the action of people sitting on the couch, waiting for a politician, waiting for the military, waiting for some benevolent benefactor to step in and save the day. General Flynn, my contention, I believe your contention, has always been the people who save the day are our listeners, are every American, every person who gets off the couch, because they want the cult, the syndicate wants you on the couch. They want you consuming their bought-off lamestream fake media. They want you in fear. They want you sick. They want you financially destitute. And the only way we save this country is getting off the couch. Trust whatever plan you want, but the plan should be focused on freedom and action.
Yeah. And so all of that has been really to the detriment of our ability. So all this noise about trust the plan and the white hat and all this stuff, it's talk about utter nonsense. And it has been a waste of time, and it is one big psyop as far as I'm concerned. I see this a lot in the world of social media. I get, abused by people. I've been threatened. My life has been threatened. I've been called, for being on both sides. You know what, Dave, these are the type of people that actually get in there and they sow confusion to keep people from doing what they should be doing, which is getting involved as citizens of this country.
That's right.
One of the things that Abraham Lincoln warned us about, and I won't get his quote quite right, but he did it when he was a young man, actually well before he was the president. He talked about the demise in a speech he gave to a men's group in, I think, 1838. He talked about the demise of the union of the country. This is well before the Civil War started, right? 1838. And he basically said that not with all of the resources, all the armies of the world, with the exception of ours, led by a Napoleon Bonaparte, could an enemy take a drink from the Ohio or take a step on the Appalachian to bring the end of the Union, the United States of America. Our demise will come from within, and it will be us who will bring itself to us and he used the word suicide. It will be an internal struggle that will bring the end of this country. And he was right in 1838. He said that at the ripe old age of 28 years old, right? And when I think about our forefathers and the great leaders of history, and the kinds of things that they always warned us about, right? They warned us about these kinds of times, the rise of tyranny, the overreach of tyrannical leaders, the idea that men are human beings and fraught with the potential to be corrupt and corrupted, right? And because we have few benevolent leaders in our midst, and that's why in my time in the military, I learned a lot about leadership. I saw some really great leaders. I work with many of them, and I also saw some really poor leaders. And as I've gone through not only my military experiences of almost 3.5 decades, but also, I say that I lived 6 lifetimes in the last 6 years from all the other persecution that my family and I went through. And now what I see going on in our country, that's why this was never really about me, Dave.
It's true.
And them going after Mike Flynn, which was really the beginning of the coup led by Obama. It was really about going after this country, and you had to get people out of the way.
That's right. One
of the first casualties, probably the first major casualty, was me. Was the guy that's talking right now.
Point of fact.
On your show, and that was a very intentional takedown, and they did it masterfully, right? And so here I am, years later. They probably should have literally taken me out, but they didn't. They didn't take the chance, and I guarantee that they thought about it, and they probably discussed it. But here I am, and lucky enough for me, blessed enough that I am not, vindictive or hateful or a scornful type of personality. What I am is I'm determined, and I'm resilient, and I'm persistent, and I understand not only, world history, but U.S. history. And I understand what our founders have taught us all the way through every leader in this great, beautiful experiment of democracy called the United States of America as a constitutional republic. We now are in the struggle for our very existence as a country. There's no precedent in history for where we are today, other than maybe the only one that I can generally say that might be close is the fall of the Athenian Empire. Maybe there's 1 or 2 other empires that had, indicators that were similar, but certainly when the Athenian Empire fell, it was at the time the greatest and strongest empire on the planet at that time, strongest navy, strongest army. But they had massive debt, and they were overextended, and they had internal turmoil in their own little Republican type of government, their own little democracy that they did have, and they collapsed quickly. And so I don't want the United States to get there. I think we can recover this because we still have rights. We still have some people that are in our government that are not in charge, but they certainly are able to speak up at times, like we do see. Like I said, there's whistleblowers already, and there's more whistleblowers to come. And there's some other things that are being worked on. But this idea of the plan is you and I, Dave.
That's right.
You and I, using the platforms that we have to inform the American people, and then the American people have to make their own damn decisions to get involved as citizens of this great country.
General Flynn, I'm not just saying this because you're here. I've said this to a multitude of people. I've said it numerous times on my radio show and on my videos. I truly believe if you were not removed from public service as you were, we would not be in the situation we are, not just in this country, but around the world.
Yep.
And Obama telegraphed it. It's my understanding when Obama met with President-elect Trump, he told him, and you can tell me if I'm off on this, there are 2 people you need to watch out for. Kim Jong-il in North Korea and General Michael Flynn.
Yeah, in fact, and it was actually Kim Jong-un, who's the dictator of North Korea. Trump coined the term Rocket Man, and General Michael Flynn. Don't hire General Michael Flynn. Why? why would Obama, why would he? It was a very short meeting too, by the way, Dave. And those were the two topics that he raised to transition the entirety of the U.S. government. Don't hire, so Kim Jong-un, okay, dictator, got his finger on potential nuclear weapons, but don't hire General Mike Flynn. Obama hired me twice.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's this old phrase about bring your friends close, but bring your enemies closer. Because maybe that was the purpose of him hiring me twice. And then when they realized that they couldn't get me to do their bidding while I was in uniform, because I wasn't going to do their bidding, which was to tell the BS line about Al Qaeda's bin Laden's dead, Al Qaeda's on the run, ISIS is a JV team. That was a lie. That was the first casualty of war is the truth. So that was a lie by Obama. I was going to say Biden, but by Obama.
One of the same. Yeah.
But that's a very true statement, Dave. And I was the first casualty of the Trump administration. And Donald Trump did not know. He did not know, and he was lied to by people in his own inside of his own administration as well. So it's not just Obama with his minions in the likes of Comey or Brennan or Rice or Yates. It was also people in the establishment who are also controllable people, and that information that's been reported on plenty of times.
And people immediately around Donald Trump.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Immediately around Donald Trump.
Yeah, like the vice president and his chief of staff.
And maybe even some of President Trump's own family members.
Possibly, but most definitely the establishment that are on both sides of the aisle, the quote unquote political aisle, which doesn't exist. We have a uniparty.
That's right.
And so anyway,
I call him General Flynn, the Republicrats.
Yeah, that's right.
Owned and operated by a syndicate. General Flynn, I'd like to thank you for your perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice for every person in this country and every person of the world. General Flynn, what's the best way for folks to follow you on a daily basis?
Yeah, so and I'll unashamedly plug my books. So they can go to generalflynn.com, generalflynn.com, and if you can help push that out. And I have these two books. The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare and the Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare, How to Fight AI. And these are great books. The first one that came out is a bestseller, and I'm trying to make this a bestseller. That actually means less to me than just making sure, particularly this book, the Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. If people read this, they'll understand what it is that we're up against.
General Flynn, again, thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. I thank you folks for joining us. It's time to get off the couch if you haven't already, because the only way the syndicate wins is with you on the couch. I thank you for your time today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.
My name is General Mike Flynn, and I want everyone to know that I stand fully behind Beverly Hills Precious Metals and its owner, Andrew Sorcini. We are facing one of the greatest periods of financial uncertainty in both American and world history, and so now is the time to organize your finances. With the advent of the BRICS pay system, we need to now seriously consider how we can take better care of ourselves and our families and start some serious decision making when it comes to our wealth. You can also ask about their newest 2-ounce coin of yours truly. It's an absolutely great gift, and I am deeply honored to be part of history, as well as helping people protect their finances, their wealth, and their investments. So visit gold.generalflynn.com. Tell them the General sent you. Thank you so very much. God bless you, and God bless America.